Hello, good morning. Welcome to our live talk program. This is Lloyd Grubb here, your host on Revive Reform Radio, doing our live talk program covering the importance of church on your Tuesday morning rise and shine. And this morning here, we're looking at a topic belonging to a true church or gimmick or doctrine only church. So, welcome again to our live talk program. Hopefully, you had a blessed night rest and you're ready to take on today, this day that the Lord has given you, life and liberty. Let us pray. Thank you, Lord, again for the blessings of your word. Thank you, dear Lord, for rest. I pray, Father, that you may be with us as we look into these things, and may you bless our minds. We pray for Christ's sake. Amen. So, I want to talk to you here this morning, and top of the morning to you here. Hopefully, at a blessed night rest. And want to talk to you about this thing here as belonging to a true church or gimmicks or doctrine only church. And this is something important as we interact with religion and we see religion, and also as we see what's going on in the broader context of religion via the news and what's happening in other churches. And for the most part, as you know, and I covered here last week and probably the week before, there's certain upheavals that are going on in the Christian church, especially in the big mega churches in the U.S. and also in the Catholic churches, which is the mega churches of the Dark Ages. So the modern mega churches, which is primarily evangelical churches, and then the old world mega churches, which is the Catholic Church. When we look at what's going on and all the reports that come in out of that, then one could take solace, so to speak, in thinking about where you are at and what you belong to. But it's important to even think deeper than this, because a lot of what's happening there, it's basically a template that is playing out amongst us. And we have to be careful as to observe, be observant, and know what we ought to do and where we ought to be, where we're supposed to rest our head, where do we belong. And so the question of belonging to a true church becomes an important discussion, especially for those of us who belong to churches that we say we are the true church and we have the truth. And that's important to claim. But the reality is church is more complex than simply gimmicks, which normally comes in the form of evangelism and also doctrine only. That normally the church would say, well, we have the true doctrine, hence we are true. Because church is more complex. As a matter of fact, the complexity of a church goes beyond just saying what the church believes or what type of gimmicks or straight things they do, honest things they do to bring the gospel to others. The primary thing to me is the character. As we know in the Bible, the most important part of the Bible is the life stories. Well, the reality of it, the most important parts of the church is how the members are living. But you can make so much emphasis on externals that you ignore the reality that's going on and what really makes a church. It's not so much just the doctrine that's important. What is the philosophy of the church? You can't get right unless you believe right, and you have truth. You can't end up in the right place if you have the wrong equation. So the doctrines or the truth of the church is very important. But beyond that is also what makes up a church is how does it spread that truth that's normally called the doctrines or the evangelistic processes. And a lot of churches, what they do is gimmicks. And then primary to me is how is the truth being lived out in the lives of the members? Are the members true? Is the church function true? Is the pastor true? Is the church structure true? Is it true to the Bible? And that's very important. And so when we look at some things, and we're going to look at some things today, or this morning here, I want to share some of that with you here because I want you to think about that. Because a lot of time people join churches and they'll join church and they forget that the main component of church is its members and how it function in the real in comparison to the Bible. But somebody say, well, isn't it important just to have the truth? It's important. You know, there's churches that are just filled with errors. And as I say, if you start out from a point of view of error, you're not going to get to a place of truth or function in a true way because you're in error. So that's obvious. But even if you have the truth and you're not functioning right, it is almost, it is as how Christ says, to whom much is given, much more is required. So one could sit back and say, look at these church over here, they're having so much problems and they teach error. But then you say, well, if you teach the truth, why you have so much mess also on your hand? That is a bigger condemnation, because you're living in error while holding the truth. As Paul says in Romans chapter 1, it is that they hold the truth in unrighteousness. That means while they had the truth and claimed the truth and professed the truth and preached the truth, their lifestyle was a contradiction of that truth that they have. So this is where the question comes: belonging. Because there's so many people who are living this life and they don't belong. And the reason that I believe that they don't belong, because whatever they belong to, especially I'm talking about church people, church folk, they are a part of a group of people who are not living the truth. The truth has not sanctified them. And because the truth has not sanctified them, they're in error in a sense, while holding the truth in unrighteousness. Their lifestyle is a contradiction of the truth that they profess. And so those who belong to them don't have a true sense of belonging, because they're not with true, honest people. To me, one of the most powerful and important thing is for the person to be honest. And that's where, to me, the jumping off point is. One has to be honest in all situations. Because if you're not, then the truth is going to be held in unrighteousness. And a person has to be true to what they say they believe in. And then now the relationships can go forward. You show me a broken relationship. And a lot of time, what the problem there is most such a lack of truth and a lack of honesty. Person is not honest. And so we want to be honest in our dealing. So we start off here in Matthew chapter 7, verse 13. We're going to see if we can weave our way through these texts here and paint a picture truly of why church is important and why, as I say, the church has to be true. Belonging to a true church has to be true, but not true just in the sense of, while we hold these doctrines to be self-evident, or these doctrines to be true, but do you live those doctrines? As I said, belong for years in churches that people, if I ask them certain things, they'll say, yeah, this is the right thing to believe. But that was it. It was a theoretical acceptance of what is truth. But they didn't live it. So if it's come down to the issue of being honest, being fair, being just, being kind, being having integrity, they would not carry through. But if you ask them, what is a Christian supposed to be like? They'll tell you, a Christian is supposed to be honest, pure in heart, kind, loving, just, whatever. Now, how do you do that? They're like, oh no, we don't do that. So, but we accept the truth. We're the true church. And it baffles my mind for years. You go to a church and people hate people because they're not the proper skin color or something. And I say, I don't get this, but you say you're Christian. You say, yeah, we hold the truth. We believe in the Sabbath. We believe in all this. And I'm like, what's the point of all this if you have hate and superiority complex? You see, and that's where I started to pull back, even at a younger age, and say, wait a minute, something is wrong here. And I realized you could belong to a church that is a true church, quote unquote, but they're not true. They're not honest. They're not just. Have no equity. So very important. So Matthew chapter 7 verse 13 onwards says, enter ye in at the straight gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction, and many there be which go in thereat. Because straight is the gate and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it. So in my mind, I say, okay, I know the story of Noah, I know the story of Joshua and Caleb, I know the story of so many stories in the Bible where there was just a few. Story of Elijah and the Shunammite, all that story. And the woman that Elijah went to when there was famine and all that. So it's like, okay, so there's always a few. But so if I'm in a church and the church claims millions, uh, then I guess it's true because it's true in comparison to the billions in the world, right? And that's kind of how, and then I start realizing, when they teach you something when you're young, you really have like rose-colored glasses over your eyes, so you don't see things properly, and you don't understand how unique and how rare it is when you have people that are true and faithful. This is how I see it. I remember years back, and I think I've said this here before, that I remember this pastor was saying when he used to think about it years back about the 144. But there's always this discussion: is it figurative or is it literal? And people go back and forth. Is that number like a figure that's a symbolic number, or is it a real number? And he said years back when he would think about it, he would see it as probably symbolic because that's a small number. If you're saying these are the special group of people who have no guile in their mouth. Let's just use that one example in the Bible, that one description, I should say. They have no guile in their mouth. Then you say, okay, that's a small number, 144,000. That's not a large number. And then, as years roll by, as you interact in church, as you interact with people, you start to realize, wait a minute, that's a huge number. 144,000. Then you start to say, probably that number is symbolic because that's a huge number. 144,000 people that have no guile. People are so crooked in their mouths. They spin so much. It's hard to ask a person a question and they give you a straight answer. People read your question, read into it, reread it, spin it, bang it around in their heads, and then they throw it and spit out an answer to you. And sometimes they give you an answer. It baffles the mind. You're like, they thought more on the question than I thought on the question. I literally just wanted to know where is such a street. And they started to think about why you going to the street. Why do you think I know why you're going to the street? Do I look like a map? All kind of stuff they start thinking. And then they spit out an answer for you thinking, what happened? You're sick in your head? Why are you giving me all the answer? I didn't ask you all that. I just want to know where the street is at. Why are you reading into all this? Important. So when we look at the Bible here, the Bible says, enter the straight gate. And then at verse 14 it says, because few there be that find it. It's not that it's hard to find, it's that what a person is expecting in religion and what a person, the truth of the Bible, this idea of being true and honest and kind, I think it's lost in the church for the most part over the years. I think this concept is lost. If what I'm trying to explain to you is lost. And let me say it again. Where you could go to a church and what makes you a believer is that you accept the right doctrines. You're a doctrinal Christian. And don't fool yourself for 1 minute that an evangelical church that's not big on doctrine is not a doctrinal Christian, because there's a different set of doctrine. The doctrine is basically come as you are and stay as you are. It's a philosophy. It's a teaching, and you have to accept the set of teaching and you're good. And don't judge and all that stuff. So this whole idea here for me has been fascinating, because this is why I think you have so many people who they don't never work on their character, and they never see the character part of the Bible, because they were never baptized into that type of religion. They were baptized into a religion that says the church is true if it has the true teachings. And this is why you have Jehovah's Witness, Seventh Adventists, many times Baptists and other churches, that their focal point is to you're a follower based upon the fact that not because you've become washed in the blood of the Lamb, but you've accepted these doctrines. And the doctrines is what make you a Christian. So as long as you say you accept water baptism, you're a Christian. And that's it. But there's never going to be an emphasis that you need to be kind, you need to be fair, you need to be just. Because that's what a Christian is. So the fruits of the Spirit and the character part is left out. And so now imagine you belong to a church and there's people who character means nothing. The realness of the teachings of the Bible means nothing. But they have their doctrines right. And normally now what happens is that say somebody come along and they're teaching something and it's not the true doctrine. They attack them mercifully like they're a backpack of hyenas. They're pack of some wild dogs. And now the person now feel like I don't belong, or even before they attack him, if they never attack, you never really feel like you belong because you're not belonging to a family that is different from your blood family. Because your blood family really many times is just merciless and unkind. Sort of nasty people who basically they just treat you a certain way, ill treat you. And then you say, okay, I belong to a church family, these are God's people. And they treat you similar to like your church, your blood family, because they never been washed, because they weren't baptized into that religion. The other big thing here that I would say when you talk about entering into the straight gate is that, and I've observed this, that many of churches, their process again, because they're not emphasizing being true in the sense of being true as a Christian, true to the doctrines, true to the character of Christ, true to the what it is to be a Christian. They're just emphasizing, say, we preach the gospel. So they're more evangelical or they're into witnessing. But being true is not important. And so they build upon gimmick. They do gimmickry to claim that they're getting people baptized or into the church or get the gospel to them. And people join based upon that. And that's something big I've seen, where people will join based upon the gimmick. But there's no truth to what they're doing. In other words, if they stop the gimmicks, or they say for a month we're not going to do evangelism, just put it, that's what they call it, evangelism. The church feel devoid of Christianity. But as long as they're doing the gimmick, it feel like something is happening. In other words, if they're doing some type of, like, okay, say I'm here doing the radio program, all right? And so as long as I'm doing this, it doesn't matter that I'm not a Christian in character outside of this activity. As long as I'm doing this, people say it's getting the gospel out. But all the lack of care, unkindness, being untrue, all that type of stuff, all the Christian virtues, what it is to be truly a Christian and to be a true church with those I worship with, is gone. So the person based everything upon not so much who I am and how do I minister to others and how do I care about others, but that I'm doing something. You get that? I don't know if you get that. If you get that, say amen. You got it. If you didn't, I'll try to make you get it later. I'll try again. So Matthew chapter 7 verse 15 through 20 says, beware of false prophets which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravening wolves. I love this text because this text here tells you, again, and I can use this text so often, this text tells you again what the problem is. See, if you're not true, it's easy to come in sheep clothing and nobody never know, because if you have a church and the premise of the church is, say, the media ministry, or the premise of the church is we feed the poor, or the president of the church is that the premise of the church is that we are pure to doctrine, we can show you in the Bible the true doctrine, but you never deal with the individuals and say, are they true? Are they like Christ? Then it doesn't matter. You could be a wolf in sheep clothing. You see, if my premise is just that I preach the truth, but my premise is not that I preach the truth, but also I'm true to what I preach. I'm going to be kind. I'm going to be fair. Then it doesn't matter. And this is why you could have churches where you have all kind of evildoers, warmongers, you have all kind of backbiters, you have all kind of stuff like that, and they're claiming they're the true church. They're true, all right. They're true to the devil probably, but they're not true to Jesus. See, and so they can. It's easy to have a wolf in sheep clothing because the wolf can cover, but you never get to get on the inner to see what's behind that clothing. So the facade is what gets people, because the function of the church is structured to a facade, and then you have superficial relationships. And that's where you could have a person belong to a church, and I could go to the elders, let me ask you this, do you know that person beyond their name? And they'll say no. I say, how long this person been going to church? 10 years. And I say, you don't know them beyond their name? No. So what if that person is a wolf? I wouldn't know. And that's the reality how many churches are, because the emphasis is only, do you believe in the truth? And then you say, well, what is the truth? And I say, well, here, number 1, number 2, number 3, and I keep going down. And I said, these are the truth. Do you believe in them? And I say, yes. Okay, you're a Christian. You're part of us. And that's it. And that's how we've built churches for years. And that's how we're still building churches. We build based upon a doctrinal questionnaire, or we build based upon gimmicks, And as long as we build on those two things, we basically, as long as we're true to the gimmick or we're true to the doctrine, you're a Christian. And then the person who is part of a church like that, they have that void and that loneliness because the experience is not real. And so many people try to do spiritual formation, try to do music ministry, try to do pantomimes, try to do all kind of stuff to fill that lack of realness. And it's not being filled because you can't fill it. Because to be real and to have a real experience, you have to be true. It has to be a true church. You have to have people who are true. In other words, you have to have people who are honest, people who are kind. No matter how much a person goes up in front again and think, and they sing, it will not replace, it doesn't make up for the unkindness, because you see, the kindness is that garment, that robe of Christ's righteousness. You see, if I ask you, is the robe of Christ's righteousness in literal, because the robe is figurative to character, is being doctrinally pure, the robe of Christ's righteousness? One could say yes to a certain degree. It's probably some of the threads that run through, because it's truth that make us who we are. But is part of the truth is that is Christ humble. Somebody said, well, no, I didn't get baptized under that. That's not one of the doctrines. True, being humble is not a doctrine. But if I ask you, if you read the Bible, and they normally say a doctrine has to be proven with more than one text. If you read the Bible, could you come away with that a huge doctrine, big doctrine, bigger than most of the doctrines that we'll say is a doctrine, is humility to be a Christian? I would say yeah. But nobody's going to baptize you and say, do you accept the doctrine of humility? Nobody baptized you under that. But if you say, what is one of the massive things about Christ's character? He's humble. He's humble. He talked more about that than he would talk about, or displayed that, I should say, and talked about it, and it was described of him that way, more than he would talk about, say, hell doesn't burn forever, or that there's a hell. But somebody, how could you say that, brother? Because they're not true, so they don't understand what I'm saying. It would be hard to understand. See, so if you belong to a group of people who humility is not something that they accept, and it's not a requirement, it's not something that is important. And so you could have a church just filled with a bunch of proud peacocks, just always showing their tail and their feathers, rude and obnoxious. And yet they say, oh, but this is a true church. I would say, why? Oh, because we believe in, say, water baptism. I would say, really? And that's what makes you true. Again, do you say honesty is a doctrine in the Bible? One has to be a Christian, one should pledge and commit to be honest, to tell the truth. I would say, yeah. So when you go back again to the 144,000, and it says they have no guile, that is even beyond honest. That's no shade. So I'm saying you don't throw shades. See, an honest person won't shade. It's like if I'm talking to you and you say something to me and I'm like, and then 2 days later, I'm sitting and thinking all of a sudden, the thing you said to me, I realized, wait a minute, this person was throwing shade at me. I say, ring, let me ask you this. What do you mean by what you said a few days ago? Oh, yeah, because I was saying, and I'm like, man, if you're going to say something to me, just say it to me. Don't be like, coming with all this guile talk. Just be straight. But people not straight. But if I ask you, is that one of the requirements of being a Christian? Yeah, because again, you would say the robe of Christ's righteousness is not so much in anything else but in doctrine. I'm sorry, in character. Now, did Christ preach the gospel? Yeah, but Christ didn't know gimmick. Christ was straight. Christ goes somewhere, and he didn't, and they rejected him. He didn't come up with all kind of gimmicks. But somebody could do all kind of gimmicks and say, "Oh yeah, we're getting the truth across." And I can show you churches after churches that do gimmick. They're not doing gimmick for the secular folk. They're doing the gimmick to capture the already Christians, because the already Christian is duped by the gimmick. So this is why I said, beware of false prophet who come to you in sheep clothing. You see, the clothing is external. So they have the clothing to mimic it. But when you get to learn of the person, no. You can't fool them. And people say, oh, no, you can't fool. I've been into so many churches and the person say, yeah, you can trick a person or deceive a person. And I tell you, this is a novice speaking. It's a person that they themselves are fooling themselves. And they think they're fooling everybody. Nobody can duplicate the Christian character unless they can't. You know, it's impossible. And the reason why it's impossible, because the only way a person might seem like a Christian is if you don't know them. Because you can't duplicate character. As N.G. White famously says, beautiful statement, here it goes. Character is not transferable. Character is not transferable. See, character is when you know the person. You see a person walking on the street, or a person say, hi. Hi. You don't know who that person is, because character is not transferable. You can't know the character by walking past a person. How many times you see a young man see a young girl walking by and you think that could be my wife, and not knowing that says that's from the pits of hell. But you can't tell by just seeing a person walking on the street. You got to know the person. You got to spend time. You got to see them over months or years for you to start knowing. And even then, you just start knowing until you get married. So that's why, again, they come to you in sheep clothing. They're coming in the church. But you could have a person knowing somebody in the church for 10 years. They don't know them. They go to church with them for 10 years. And they think they know them and think, oh, this is a nice brother. And then you say to them, so let me ask you this, have you personally interact with them? And then silence, and they say, actually, no. I only come to church with them. We talk in the Bible class or Sabbath school, or, there's divine service. We probably be shaken a few times. And that's been all my interaction for 10 years. You don't know that person. So you can definitively say that person is a Christian, because you don't know that person. But the person can come in a wolf clothing and you think you know them, but you don't. You're fooling yourself if you say, I know that person. You yourself, you're lost. You don't understand what to know a person is. To know a person is you know them intimately. Verse 20 says, wherefore by their fruits you shall know them. And the Bible, Christ goes on to teach that it's impossible for you to pick, as I say, grapes from a thorn bush. So when we look at this life here, we look at what's happening even in the church, we can see that what is really needed is churches that the emphasis is everything, not a minimalist here, but addition. That means we still need doctrine. We still need to do the gospel. But that does not define. What defines is more than all that. We need to be true to especially character. We need to emphasize character. Because many of the hurt and pain that people are going through I believe is caused because character was never emphasized. Again, go back to the Catholic Church. What they're going through is that the priest is not known. And I've said this multiple times, that how many times you see a pastor come to a church, they're brought into the church by the administration, and they never get introduced, and their referral never comes with them. There's no referral. Nobody knows where they were, what they did, what type of good work they did, or what type of problem. If they did good work, they'll tell you. But what kind of problem they caused, they never tell. So the person is moved around, and the sheep are destroyed because the sheep are in ignorance. But if a person is going to be your pastor, you should know that person, where they live, how they live, who they are. They should come with some type of referral. They shouldn't just appear out of nowhere. Who is this person? And that's just the reality. And that goes for just about anything in life. Who the person? Who's referring them? And if you notice, I think why most of these things came out in the modern age, I think is because of the internet. Because you see, a person could go to one town and say you're in New Jersey here, they're in North Jersey. They do the dirt. Then they go to Central Jersey, do the dirt. Then go to South Jersey, do the dirt. And the places that do the dirt, so there are 3 victims. Those 3 victims, it would be almost virtually impossible for them to connect, to share notes, and to realize, wait a minute, that same person did that to you? Yeah. So now, for the most part, unless some divine intervention, that wouldn't happen. But now, the internet make it that you could go in and probably somebody post a blog somewhere, and they're talking about something, and they say, oh yeah, that's a similar situation happened to me. Wait a minute. If I'm getting what they're saying without they dropping a name, they belong to the same denomination, and they actually not only belong to the same denomination, but they actually at one point in time had the same priest. I wonder if what happened to me happened to them, and boom, you start having all this situation spreading. And then you start to find out, because things get blown up in social media and all that type of stuff. And it's hard for people to hide behind anonymity because nobody knows them. And that's where the reality. The world, as I say, is becoming a village. And it's the same thing happening in these major churches. Something happened, and now it has to be noised abroad. And people are trying to cover, and they can't cover because they're getting exposed larger and faster. So, again, when you don't know, people can act. But when you know, it's hard for people to act because you'll see who they are. And that's important to note. So we talk about belonging to a true church. It's important that we don't get caught up with the gimmick or get caught up with this idea that, oh, well, this church is true because they have the true doctrine. Because remember, the same thing we say, other churches say it. If you go to a Baptist church, they say, we baptize. We baptize and we are the Baptists. If you go to a Catholic church, they'll say they're the only true bride of Christ. They're the original church. They're the church that Paul wrote to in Rome. And they received a letter from Paul that famously talk about Romans chapter 1 with all the homosexuality. And they say, we're still struggling with that, so we're the true church. And you go to the Jews, they're the true. You see, people can take that true idea and forget that claiming something and professing something not the same as being something. What has to be true. And as I say, if I didn't go through a certain experience, I would never be sitting here talking what I'm talking. I had to go through certain experiences for me to say, wait a minute, that don't make no sense. How this person is part of a true church and a true believer, and this person is just hateful as ever. And then it made me start thinking, wait a minute, what's going on here? Because as I say, when you fresh, you believe, these are God's saints. And you start dealing with the person, you think, this is not a saint, this person is a dirty wretch. What's going on here? And you click, and you start realizing it's not the profession, because I said when you're young, you don't understand. In 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1, it says, this know, 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1, said, this know also that in the last days perilous times shall come. So perilous times shall come, and it talks about men shall be lovers of themselves and so forth. And then verse 4 says, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof, from such turn away. So it said the troubles that come on the world is because people have a form of godliness. So notice again, wolf in sheep clothing, having a form of godliness. So there is something outwardly that's telling you that the person is a Christian. But if you get to know them inwardly, what you realize is that character is not there. And if you say, where am I getting them from? Verse 2, 3, and 4. See, that's why I skipped there. Notice, I'll read again verse 1 and 5. This know also, that in the last days perilous times shall come. Verse 5. Having a form of godliness, but deny the power thereof, from such turn away. So they have a form of godliness. They have a sheep clothing on. They have a facade. If you don't know them, you would think they're Christian because you're seeing the form. It's just if you're driving past a building and there's a structure, but the building is empty on the inside, you don't know. You think it's a full building because it's the form of a building. You can look at a building and say that's a warehouse, that's a factory, that's a power plant, that's a residential facility, because it has the form of it. But so you go inside of it, you realize, oh, it has the form, but it's really something else. And it's the same thing. So you go now, you belong to a church, and the emphasis is form of godliness. You see, most of what we talk about as churches and what people belong to, they are going to form churches. They're a form of godliness church. But there's a total denial of the power of God. And Jesus says, from such, turn away. Why? Because there's no character. So somebody said, okay, but what if the church does powerful evangelism? Christ says it to the Pharisees. You can go sea and land and will win one proselyte and make him twice the son of hell as yourself. The person is going to even be worse than you. What if they have the true doctrines? Right, you could have the true doctrine, but it's a form. The doctrines is the form. The person emphasizes, I believe in the truth. And they'll come out and say, what do you believe? Do you believe in the Trinity or not? Yeah, but your character stink. Get out of my face. But that's just the point. The person will tell you, oh, I'm true and you're false because you don't believe this. You see? And what's going on there? It's a form of godliness. The doctrine is what makes the person right. And this is why we have these fights. And you'll see these people fighting back and forth. Two rude, obnoxious people fighting with each other about who has the truth. And one might have the truth and one don't. Both could be wrong. Both could be wrong, or one could be wrong. And sometimes both wrong. Right? Both wrong, one wrong, whatever. But as they're doing this, they're fighting and they're going to prove to you that they have the truth. And they're rude as ever. And you're like, okay, so you have the truth, but you have no character. And you're sanctified? Because I remember one time I asked somebody the same question. I said, think about it. Somebody's going around and teaching these doctrines and said, these prophecies or these doctrines, they are true. But they have no character. They're dishonest, they're crooks, they're immoral in all kind of ways. But they're sanctified, they're being sealed for the second coming of Jesus. They're preaching the sealing message, that's what they say. But their character is rotten. And they're going to prove that you're in error because, or I'm in error, because they're preaching the sealing message. You must accept the sealing message. So I'm saying, wait a minute. If you're teaching the sealing message, aren't your character supposed to be being sealed? Even if you say, well, I'm not altogether there. But at least you're growing in grace and in the knowledge of Jesus Christ. You're learning to be more kind and more patient and more true and honest and have integrity. How can those things mean nothing to you? But yet you have the message and you need to give me the truth. Then that seems weird. And I'm treating you with respect. I'm trying to be kind and patient to you. And then after a while, it was like, man, I want to hear this. Because you're so lost in your sin, you can't even get it. So if you look at verse 2 through 4, you notice there, all there is just character. The last days are perilous because people have rotten characters. Men love themselves, they're covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy. That's our character. We deal a person that's unthankful, right? Oh, it's so irritating to deal with because no matter how kind and nice you are to them, no matter how generous you are to them, that character trait sting to high heaven. When people are unholy, you can't worship with them. Without natural affections, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasure, more than lovers of God. Those are all bad character traits that people have. So, and that's what makes the world so perilous. Because when a person is covetous, it's terrible. Unthankful, terrible. Because no matter what blessing they get from God or man, they're never satisfied. And just imagine belonging to a church where this is the church. They have a form. You imagine going to a form of godless church. You're going to come up with a lot of bad testimonies. Because all that's happening is you have people, they're this. They're all not what is there. Multiple of this. They're like Romans chapter 1. Multiple sickness in one person. But they do the form well. They wear their sheep clothing well. And when you deal with them, you will regret belonging to that church. And this is what we have done over the years. We have emphasized just doctrine or doctrine and gimmicks, but not being true. So people who are fake as ever, turmoils in their home, turmoils in their brains, turmoils that anybody come around them, pure problems, but they do the form well. And they'll tell you, which nothing wrong with this, what I'm going to say, but the reality is they'll tell you, I always have a track in my car. I always have a book in my car. But you need that book in your heart. You need that track in your heart. You need it in your head. You need to take the book and keep hitting yourself in the head until it gets in. And you start acting out the things that are in the book. Verse 6 says, For of this sort are they, which creep into houses and lead captive silly women, laden with sin, led away with diverse lust, ever learning and never able to come to the knowledge of truth. So you see there what's going on. Of this sort are they. There are people who they do the form so well and they make fool of silly women. You look at some, as a matter of fact, I've noticed over the years that the gimmick churches, they when I say gimmick, I'm talking about evangelistic gimmick, and the doctrine focus churches, whether it be, and some of them, some of the gimmick churches could be praise and worship or conservative, man. If you notice here is that one of the things that is consistent with them is that they're led away silly women captive. It's sad because laden down with sin, all kind of guilt, always crying, always feel remorse for their past. Seem like they never got the memo that God forgive them of the past and they should go and sin no more. And so they never really come to natural truth. So imagine you belong to that now, and they know. So say, for instance, they come amongst me and they say, "Well, okay, you just straight. You don't do gimmicks, and you're into the doctrine, but you don't get up every day and preach about the mark of the beast. But you're not real." And I said, "Why?" Because you talk a lot about character, and they'll reject that because it's easy to deal with a church that focus on gimmicks and doctrine. But to deal with somebody that's talking about character, after a while it becomes irritating. Because if you're a mess, you don't want to hear that. It's better to hide in broad daylight in a place where all we focus on is doctrine. Because you can say, "Oh, I believe that. Oh, yeah, that's the true doctrine. Hey, let's go to the Bible. Let me show you that I know where to find those Bible passages that has those doctrines that show that those doctrines are true." And the person will go through, "Oh, yeah, and this text and that text and that text and that text." But character, no character. And somebody said, "Man, this person knows so much Bible. Oh, this person knows so much Ellen G. White." They will just quote Ellen G. White from morning until evening. But they never live by one thing it says. But they know. And you meet people like that all the time. Their brains are packed. They can give you every text. They think Bible memorization is salvation. Pardon me. Bible memorization is salvation. That's what they think. So if you're a savant, hopefully I'm saying that right. If you're a person that have photographic memory, you're more saved than everybody else. The more memories, more saved, because they say, in the last days, you shouldn't have to remember or whatever practice what you're gonna say, because the Holy Spirit bring back to remembrance. And then they'll say, well, if you can't, if you didn't put it in your head, then it's not gonna come back. So you got to memorize. And so then, who is the most righteous person in the church? The person that knows the Bible from cover to cover, verbatim. And many people believe that literally. Sorry again. So many people believe that. And so you could belong to a true church, or you could belong to a church that is like all kind of evangelistic gimmick with a liberal or conservative, or it's a doctrine only church. It's a doctrine only church, and that's it. And that's what makes you a Christian, or makes you belong to a church. But then your experience in those churches are woeful, because you have no true experience. You have no true connection with people. And the people you do connect with are these lovers of pleasure and false accusers, people always judging you and stuff like that. And you have a terrible experience, because they're learning but never able to come to the knowledge of truth. And the Bible says, from this type of people, turn away. You got to turn away. You got to avoid. Because if you don't avoid those people, what it is, they're going to hurt you. They're going to hurt you badly. And they're going to hurt you while claiming that they're Christian true and true, and they love the Lord because he has heard their voice and all kind of stuff like that. And so you don't want to do this. So in John chapter 10, verse 1 through 16, if we can get there. John chapter 10, verse 1 through 16, we see a total different experience here that Christ described. And while Christ is describing it, Christ also described, the bad stuff that he's trying to protect his believers from. Notice here it says in verse 1, Verily, verily, I say to you, he that entereth not by the door into the sheepfold, but climbeth up other way, the same is a thief and a robber. That means they come to you, but they're not straight. Like I said, how many pastors you know that for years they haven't preached a straight doctrine? They don't preach doctrines anymore. And they will never come out to the members and say, I really don't believe in what you believe. I actually don't believe even these doctrines. Because it's like that famous statement. Andrew White says, if you pray and don't do, you will cease to pray. That's just me summarizing it. If you pray and don't do, you'll cease to pray. Because after a while, what's the point? And to me, that truth becomes similar for a person who believe in things that they never practice. After a while, you cease to believe in it. It becomes irrelevant, because you're practicing something else that you don't believe in. So sooner or later, you start believing what you practice. See, the lifestyle drives the doctrine. See, the doctrine is supposed to drive the lifestyle, but if you stop believing, sooner or later you will stop doing. So, thieves are robbers. But somebody say, wait a minute, but what if the person is officially endorsed by the church administration? It doesn't matter, because they're not coming straight. They're not telling you what they believe. They're dropping words. How many pastors this weekend will preach a sermon attacking multiple doctrines, but never come out of their face and just say, I don't believe this, I don't believe that. But they come into the sheepfold. That's when they say they're coming straight. They're not coming straight, because they don't tell you what they're up against. They're with. It's the same thing when a person is preaching false doctrines. They try to get you on some minor issue to open you up so that you can accept the big issue that they want to bring to you. Verse 2 says, But he that entereth into the door is in by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the porter open it, and the sheep hear his voice, and he call his own sheep by name and leadeth them out. Notice here, Christ's work of ministry is true to the statement. Christ's work of ministry is so true to the statement. Christ was not aloof from his disciples or from the people. He not just didn't know them by name, he knew them and knew what they were about. Even when he called the two brothers, James and John, Boanerges, something like that, which is sons of thunder. He was telling you that he knew them. I know them enough that I can call them a name and they're true to that name. And later on you hear them saying, we want to call fire down from heaven and burn these people up. And you could say, oh, Christ really knew them. Wow. He really got them before probably they even got themselves. And he said to them, depart from me with this madness. So this is the type of thing. See, he knows them. And it's a different method of doing church. But if you're not straight, you don't want to know. Because to know will expose you. Because if I get to know you, then in that exchange, you're going to get to know me also. See, in order for me to open you up, I have to open up myself. I have to be vulnerable to you in order for you to be vulnerable to me. That will expose many of these pastors. So they stay aloof. They're always busy, always running, always going somewhere. Where you going, man? Sit down. Let the people get to know you. So here verse 4 says, and when he putteth forth his own sheep, he goeth before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. They're familiar with him. And many times that's why people come in sheep clothing, because they can't be known by the sheep. They have to always put up all the kind of gimmick. But keep going here. It says, a stranger will they not follow, but will flee from him, for they know not the voice of a stranger. Now somebody say, how that applies? Well, that applies in reality to this day. You see it right now, big time in the churches, where there's so many churches breaking off, splitting, so many independent churches forming. And what's the main reason? Because they're in disagreement with what the pastor's doing and what they're teaching. How many churches right now, the biggest problem and challenge the righteous, not the people who are just seat warmers, the righteous is facing, is that they literally want to leave because they're fed up of what being preached from week to week. That tells you they're not hearing the voice of these guys and they're not following them. That's important to note. And you see this, and nothing going to stop this. You don't have to encourage it. It's just going to happen. People all over sooner or later, they'll be like, man, I'm staying home. I'm starting an independent church. I'm doing something, but I'm not listening to that shepherd because he's fake. He's a wolf in sheep clothing. Notice here it says, then Jesus said again, he spake this parable, but they understand not the things they were which he spake unto them. So he's talking to them and they're not understanding. Like, what are you talking about? Who's true? Because think about it, Christ was having an independent ministry. The Pharisees and Sadducees sat in Moses' seat. They had the true church. But they weren't true. They were doing all kind of gimmicks and they were emphasizing doctrines, even though a lot of what they were teaching was doctrines of men. Christ now was straight. Christ was just telling them as it is. And they're looking at Christ and like, who the true shepherd? Who the true shepherd? Who is he talking about? Who the true shepherd? You mean the Pharisees? They're the true shepherd, right? They sit in Moses' seat. I'll be like, nah, unless you're sleeping and you haven't been awake in a while. Verse 7, then Jesus said unto them again, verily I say unto you, I am the door of the sheep. All that ever come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. The people ain't listening to them. Don't be fooling yourself. The people ain't listening to them. That's why the people always going looking all over the place. That's why people come here and listen to me and listen to other independent people and stuff like that, because they're looking for truth. If it doesn't mean that I'm true, it just simply means that if they were preaching the truth, they wouldn't come here and they wouldn't go other places. They're looking around because they're not hearing the voice and they're trying to find where the voice. I'm trying to hear the voice of a shepherd. I know what a shepherd sound like, or even if I don't know the spirit, I put it in my heart that I need to look for a shepherd. So verse says, all that came of me, I'm the door, and if by me, if any man enter in, he shall be saved, and shall go in and out and find pasture. So if I'm hungry, I'm hungry, I'm not being fed, and I'm being taken care of. I'm having all this bad experience with all these hypocrites in the church. Well, so the Bible says you're going to go looking for a fold. The thief cometh not but to steal and to kill and to destroy. I am come that they might have life and that they might have it more abundantly. So a person that belongs to a liberal or a conservative evangelistic emphasis gimmick church, they're going to be robbed and steal. Hands down, no problem, question about it. A person that belongs to a church that is just a doctrine only church, they're going to be robbed and steal. No, they're going to have a horrible time, divorces, all kind of problems in their family, financial problem, health problem, mess on their hand. But they're going to say, oh, but I belong to the true church, but they're a mess. All kind of problems in the home, all kind of head problem, they're a mess. If there's a man, he can't lead out to this family because he's not getting no truth. He's not belong to a true church, but he's belong to a doctrinal true church. And that's what's happening. So the person might say, oh yeah, but I belong to the true church. Okay, great. Enjoy, keep belonging. Your life is a mess. You ain't finding good pasture. But Christ here says it's a definite. If you are under a true shepherd or under shepherd, if you're truly walking with Christ, you understand what it is. It is not just being evangelistic or doctrine, but you have to be true. You have to be around true people. Being a worship and a family of true people. People are honest and true. You'll find good pasture. You'll find green pasture. Notice here, continue verse 10. The thief cometh not but to steal and to kill, to destroy. Right there. Verse 11. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd give his life for the sheep. But he that is a hireling and not the shepherd, whose own sheep are not, seeth the wolf coming, and leaveth the sheep, and fleeth. And the wolf catcheth them, and scattereth the sheep. The hireling fleeth because he is an hireling, and careth not for the sheep. Just there for the money. It's not his life's work. You see, when you have a person who gets up, because some people say, well, the true pastors are the one that went to seminary. Could be. They could be true. Some are true, I believe. But you think about a person who gets up and say, this is my life work. I'll do this until I die. And nobody don't have to put me up to it. I take care of sheep. You go ask your pastor that. Ask him to see if he's going to say yes. That's what I'm busy into. He's like, I'm a hireling. I'm here for the money. And the money drop, I quit. Some of us, we were doing this before there was $1 on the table. And we were going to do this if there was no money on the table. And that's, to me, is what it's like some people that whatever job they do, that's just what they do. That's their skill set. They're going to be an artist until they drop dead. And that's their gift and their talent, and they're going to work it. They're not just say, oh, I'm in it for the money. Keep going here. I am the good shepherd, and know my sheep, and I know my sheep, and am known of mine. As the Father knoweth me, even so I the Father. And I lay down my life for the sheep. And other sheep I have, which are not of this fold, them also I must bring, and they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd. Very important. And so that's why I believe when a person takes up a job as an under shepherd, their intention is to be just like Jesus. What Christ was doing here to his disciples, teaching them how to take care of sheep. When he died and he resurrected, he went to Peter and said, Peter, feed my sheep. Feed my sheep. Feed my sheep. Do to my sheep what I taught you and displayed to you. Be like me. Be a shepherd of the flock. Don't be like the scribes and Pharisees and who sit in Moses' seat and claim that they're true, but they're false. Be true. You want a true experience? Be part of a true flock. It's just straightforward to me. It makes all the sense to me. Somebody say, well, I have a terrible experience. Yeah, because you're part of a terrible flock. So there's a lot of churches, they'll do all kind of gimmicks. They put up billboards, or they do this, or they do that. And they say, oh yeah, we're getting the truth out. But they're not true. It has to be the whole package. It can't be, and especially if it's any package, it has to be the character package. Because you can't duplicate character. Character is not transferable. You can't have the character of Jesus unless you have it. You either wear the robe and it's robe true, or you're wearing somebody else's robe and you're going to be found out. And that's what you can't duplicate. Anybody can do ministry work, like, as I say, we do stuff here. Anybody can sit on the doctrines. We sit on the doctrines straight as ever. But character is not duplicated. You want a good experience. You need to be around people who believe in character development. Straight up. Let's pray. Thank you, Lord, again for your truth, your word that has found us. As you promised us, dear Lord, and as we saw in Jesus, that your word became flesh and dwell amongst us. And we pray, dear Lord, that your word will become part of us as we eat and drink, that it becomes part of our flesh and we can live out thy word in our lives. May you bless us, dear Lord, to this end. Bless each and every one that is here. And we thank you again for your word, for Christ's sake. Amen. Thanks for being with me here on Revive Reform Radio. Looking forward to talking to you tomorrow morning again live when we talk about natural health. Until then, I pray that you may continue to walk with the King.